Welcome to our seventh CLUMSY conversation, our last for this year, but as you well know, this is going to continue. The conversation is only starting now. In fact, it's just warming up. So there's much more to be said into the new year around the whole issue of transformation. By the way, so we have said also at our bio caucus last week, if you have any hot topics that you would like to see presented or even wanting to make a presentation, obviously the scope is within the context of transformation. Please do let me know, and we would be very happy to accommodate you in that program, because it is a conversation that we all recognize must continue. So, colleagues, today what we are wanting to do is to have a conversation introduced to us by two of our colleagues here, Mamathuba and Karien van der Merwe. Just to tell you a little bit about them, both of them, they're partners within their consulting firm called Thrive Institute. And Neo is also academic at UJ, and Karien is consulting mostly on mega projects. So these are the two colleagues that will introduce the topic to us today. And our topic today is about handling difficult conversations about race. As you can see, it's very much a critical one. I think often people do stepped out of our workshops or whatever conversations we had, and people said, I must go and have this conversation with my family. Well, that is one of the difficult conversations that we have to have, or even with our colleagues, or wherever the case may be. So it is useful for us to talk about that. How do we go about it, learn from each other in that regard? And as I said, our two colleagues here will lead us on that conversation for the next 10 to 15 minutes. Then we will also break into little groups just to have one-on-one kind of conversations, see it, practice it, have a feel of it, come back into the room, and we'll have a broader plenary conversation on it. Welcome again, colleagues. Without further ado, let me hand over to Neo and to Karien. And please lead us on this very important topic. Thank you very much, colleagues, for agreeing to that.
Thanks, Andrew. Can I start to share my screen? Can you see my screen, colleagues? Okay, excellent. And you can hear me. So yeah, so I think just a quick story about Karien and I. We worked since 2006 together, and we've always been curious about this topic, and we've always had conversations around this topic on diversity and race and inclusion and belonging in the workplace. And our conversation has evolved, and you'll see a little bit around that today, when we've been having these conversations throughout our working lives. And as Andrew said, we are also involved in other things in our IOP lives, but we realized that this conversation is urgent and it's quite needed in IOP lives and in our country. And we've been having it, and we've had the privilege also of having it in a consulting space. So we formed the Thrive Institute, that we believe that people can thrive when they have courageous conversations. And we're just going to share some tools today on how we can build some paths, in having clumsy conversations at work, or as the topic said, difficult conversations around race. But I mean, if you think about it, and it's just not, it is the race conversation very important, but also hopefully you can use this, what we're going to share today. And we also would like to hear from you, and we're going to learn from each other and how we can use these tools in other difficult conversations. Now, just a quick one. you know, with the work of inclusion and transformation. The screen is disturbing me a little bit now. We're going to share just some tools that we have found that they've worked for us. And I think a lot of us know this model where you talk about the head, heart, and hand. A lot of time when you have information around something, and we've heard Nini Mulifi talk about it, when you've got information about something, so maybe I know Andrew to be this person, it's because I've received certain information around Andrew, right? And then I will form pathways in my head around Andrew, why is it all like that? And then I will act towards Andrew in a certain way. So in changing the work in changing the way in which we behave towards each other and I will behave towards Andrew, I'll have to change the information that I know about Andrew. So I'll have to find out, why do I think Andrew is racist towards me? Or why does Andrew say I'm racist towards him? What have I done? What have I read? Who has told me what around what I know around Andrew? And therefore, once that is done, I've got different head information. And once I know different head information, I will form a different heart process, because now my heart will connect with what I know and I will act differently towards that. And as we grow up, you know, Nini say, as we grow up, people pack our bags for us. Your teachers, all your community around you, they pack your bag for you. But it is our responsibility, especially as in the IOP space, to unpack it as we guide people in the organization how to have this conversation, or the tools we use in having this conversation. So it's quite imperative that we do that, unpacking the suitcase and having the right information. Like how Nini says that if you don't unpack it, the bag will embarrass you because it will pop open at the most, you know, times that you don't need it to. And then we'll be like, yo, did Andrew just say that? What was, you know, like, yo, I can't believe, or you yourself won't even believe that you just said that. So it's quite important to then unpack the bag. And so today, as part of unpacking the bag and repacking it, we're just going to share some quick tools, and then we can get into the conversation. Over to you, Karien. Sorry.
Thanks, Naya. Thank you for the introduction as well, Andrew. Really, as always, a privilege for Naya and I to be with you guys in this. We know that everyone's busy, even if it's only busy switching off from the year. I'm sure we're all busy, so we appreciate your time. So I'm going to very, very elementarily go over the just the process in our brains. Maybe for us as IOPs, I think we don't necessarily always share this information with our clients, but it's very important for us to understand what happens and what can influence our behavior, and what do we have control over, and where does it lie, the choice between reaction and responding, where does that lie? So a quick example that I want to use, is there anyone specifically that hasn't ever heard about the amygdala control or the prefrontal cortex regulation system in our brain? So the amygdala, when you are in amygdala control, essentially it's your fight-flight system kicking in. So whatever stories you've been told before, or wherever you got hurt personally in the past, storytelling is extremely powerful. That's what Naya also referred to now as the bag. So we have buttons that people push. So we experience pain and we experience hurt. And when we are in amygdala control, it's difficult to fully access our prefrontal cortex. And actually for this kind of conversation, and for us as IOPs to help move organizations forward, we need to have fully function inside our prefrontal cortexes, where the creative, innovative, problem-solving part of our brain functions. So I just quickly want to quote a study that was done. Malcolm Gladwell actually refers to the study in his book, Talking to Strangers. he refers to the study being done on the Navy SEALs, where they go through physical torture training. So if you get captured by the enemy, this is the stuff that you can do. And that the environment of that torture training is safe. So they can say at any time that they want to stop, they don't want to carry on with it. And the study that they did is they did an intellectual or an IQ assessment of the Navy SEALs right before they went into the training and right after the training. And the standard deviation of the IQ of the Navy SEALs dropped by 1.5 to 2 standard deviations right after the training, which is just a proof that if you are in amygdala control, you cannot fully access your prefrontal cortex. So what we want to do is we want to build a bridge. We want to find some way for us to work with and to respond in terms of this fear that we're feeling when we engage in these difficult conversations, when we are confronted with things that makes us scared, and having these conversations on race with people that you don't necessarily know, in an environment that you maybe don't feel that safe in the workspace especially, is if we understand how our bodies work and how our minds work, we can actually choose to respond rather than react. So that's the good news. So we can go to the next slide now. I don't want to make the talking part too much. So I want to actually encourage all of you to read Dr. Bruce Perry's book, What Happened to You. He explains this process in that book extremely well, just in terms of the baseline of moving from amygdala control into prefrontal cortex regulation. So regulating yourself and then relating with people, finding that psychological safety, that emotional support, and then the person actually reasons by themselves. So I always joke with this when my husband gets home and I need to ventilate and just tell him about my bad day. He immediately gives me an answer and I get angry because he skipped the relate phase. I want to feel that he's showing empathy and that he's understanding where I am. And if he does that, so I'm regulating by talking, then he gives me that empathy, then I'll find a solution myself, which is much more powerful in the end anyway. So what we want to do in the work environment is we want to create spaces for people where they can regulate together. So, come on the same wavelength, feel emotionally safe, where we actually feel connected and I feel heard and supported. I have a voice around the table with my colleagues. And if we have those two things in place, that team or that organization will come up with the solutions that will work best for themselves. So the best thing that we can do as IOPs is to facilitate that process to happen and not to go in and give them solutions for the problems. You actually want the knowledge of finding solutions in terms of these conversations is in the room. And what we need to do is we need to create the space and facilitate the process for that group of people to get to their own solutions. The tricky part about this process is that it should happen in that order. You cannot fully relate if you're not regulated, and you cannot fully reason if you are not regulated and feel that you've connected with someone. So we can move to the next slide. Thanks, Naya.
Can I maybe just add there that maybe what happens, especially, in a racial conflict, somebody says something and they fire your amygdala, and then we already in fight or flight. Hey, it's like, imagine if someone just say they trigger you, so you're just reacting, and it is easier to react because you are triggered, but there is no way that you'll get to the reasoning or come up with solutions that can move you or your team forward if you're acting in that amygdala control. It needs to go through this process so we can find solutions. And I think we can all agree that at this point in time, we really need real solutions to this problem that we are facing in our country and organizations, really.
Yeah, so this actually refers to what we have spoken about a bit already. So I'm going to go through it just very quickly. You can watch Susan David's TED Talk on emotional agility. She's actually a South African-born psychologist now working in the US. She wrote the book Emotional Agility. And what I like about her take on emotions is that there's no positive or negative emotions or right or wrong emotions. We experience emotions because it gives us information, it's data. It tells you, am I safe, am I not safe? Because your brain is wired to keep you safe, to keep you alive. So your emotions is just something that tells you, should I engage or should I run away? Should I freeze? Is it a safe space for me? And we are actually very sensitive beings. So we pick up on those things and not even necessarily realizing exactly what is happening. And the power of stories and the neuron connections that we form based on stories is often something that gets triggered when we step into a situation like a race conversation. So we grew up in a very specific environment, getting told stories, in my case, about Black people or about Indian people or about males or females. I was already a student when I got on a plane once and there was a female pilot and I thought, oh my goodness, how the hell are we going to get alive to Cape Town or arrive alive at Cape Town airport? So I had that story being told to me that there's certain things that women can't do. And that story is extremely powerful. It actually ignited fear in me. And if we know that, we can actually have the conversations, change the neuron pathways, change that triggers that we have. But we need to allow ourselves to have the actual experiences, to have these conversations with people that are different from us. We all have different stories, so that we can connect as humans and form that relationship. So for me, relationship trumps all. So if we start building relationships and we start telling our stories and sharing our experiences with our colleagues and building a relationship in terms of a work friendship, then it's so much easier to have these conversations with one another. Okay, so I think we can move on now. Thanks. And just lastly, I think this is extremely, we debated this morning. We actually wanted to record our session for you guys and just play it out so that you can see how you have these conversations when you work together. But there was a bit of a debate, should we put this slide in or not? And what was important for me here is to experience psychological or social safety, where you really feel you can show up with your authentic self, with the full you in a space and contribute to that space. Yeah. You need to know exactly who you are and be comfortable with who you are. So if you are a gay person, a straight person, I'm a white female, a white straight female, so I would want to be able to move into a space and show up as Karien van der Merwe, Afrikaans-speaking white woman living in South Africa with certain experiences and stories and life wisdom to share in the team so that I can find meaning. We all want to have a meaningful and purposeful life, but you can actually not have that experience, meaning and purpose if you cannot show up fully as yourself in a space. So if you know exactly who you are and you show up with who you are and you know the group allows you to contribute in that space to the greater good with what and who you are, and you experience belonging, you're allowed to differ from the group. You're not going to be kicked out of the group because you're different. You're actually part of the group because of your ethnicities and your individualistic sides. Then you experience that psychological safety, which relates back to that relating part of Bruce Perry's model as well. So when we have these conversations, we need to show up fully in terms of who we are and what we are, and allow the different people to contribute with the difference that we have. That's actually the strength I think we have in South Africa.
And I think also that's where the authenticity comes in, right? We are our authentic selves, and then you don't have this front that you have to keep it up. And once that front is gone, that's where the high performance can come in, because you can fully bring yourself in the conversation, fully bring yourself in the organization, and therefore that's where you can access that creativity that we're talking about. Sometimes we say people are not creative in teams, people are not giving their all, but it's because they can't bring their all to the conversation or to the workplace. So we need to okay our identity, and that okay of identity, that okay of who we are, is going to happen through going through that model that we spoke about earlier. And then and it happens through relationship and conversation, and then we can actually contribute to the conversation. Why are you showing a scared face, Karien?
I see there's someone that I needed to admit that I didn't see. I'm sorry about it.
And a lot of times I think we realize that these conversations are courageous. You know, as we said, the bags were packed for us when we were young, and then we're so scared to fall into a trap. We're so scared I'll get fired if I say something wrong, or I'll get in trouble. And it's especially in our field, as being IOPs, we need to be courageous. You know, Mandela said, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but triumph over it. It's easier to just revert to what you know. It's easier to always sit with people that look like you, sound like you, make decisions like you. But it takes a lot of courage to go to the other and to have conversations with the other, and tough conversations with other at that. But now I think we've shared the formula on having the conversation with other. And what we're going to do now, Marissa, we're going to break up in, you know, breakaway groups, just a pair, have someone you can talk to. And what we would like us to share in that, using that model, I'll put the model back up on, is what is your lived experiences of relationships in your workplace, and what in your workplace makes a clumsy conversation a bit challenging. So maybe it's a two-part question that you will share with the partner. What is your lived experience of relationships in your workplace? What has been your experiences? Maybe as a Black person, or as a white person, as a male, as a female, whatever other makes you other. What has been your lived experience in that you're being othered for? And what in your workplace makes the clumsy conversations a bit difficult? So we've got about 10 minutes to have that conversation with your partner. And if we can just do breakaway rooms in that fashion. Any questions?
Nayo, if you could also copy the exercise, just the writing into the chat box, then people will have it available.
All right, we'll do that.
All right, Marissa, if you can go ahead and just pair up people randomly, and you will have 10 minutes, colleagues, just to have some conversation around that. Thank you.
Clumsy conversations are happening now.
Indeed, indeed.
Andrew, I have already set up the group, so I'm going to open all the rooms. So please, everyone, if you see a note on your screen asking you that the host wants you to go to room 2 or 3, just accept. That'll be great.
Marissa.
Okay, and after 10 minutes, it will close automatically, but I will give you all a heads up.
Will they still have access to the chat?
Yeah, they should now.
Can we get the apples?
Oh.
Sanay asked not to be put in a room because she's also busy with something else. But you guys can join any of the rooms anytime.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey now.
Hey, my leader.
We haven't connected in so long. How are you?
I'm okay. And I almost sent you a message today.
I'm good. I'm good.
I feel like I see you on social media, so I feel like I am seeing you, but I know I'm not. So, which is quite a, what is it? Social media can make you feel like you are in contact with someone. It's so
Yeah, my social media is so bad. Like I meet people and they're like, "Oh my gosh, is your foot okay? How's your daughter doing?
Do you know
She's
what I
so
mean?
great."
Like, you know about your food. That's why it can give us that elusive life that we are living together. Wow, that's why I need to actually make real contact with you.
Let me not disturb you. Go join a group. You're working.
I'm
Bye.
waiting, guys. I'm on a clock, yo. Join a group. Oh. I must see the one that Karien is not in.
Yeah, she's in one. So I think you can go
There's
to
4 people
two.
in one.
Yeah, it's Ingra, but Ingra cannot stay long.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I added her, but I added another person, for instance, for in case she has to go and then it's only the one. Then he's left alone.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you can go to room 8. Tatiana Page is there. Tatiana, not Tatiana. Oh, and room 3. That's people I know.
All back. So I think what we can do now is to just ask the different groups to give some feedback. Maybe I'll start with this group because they ask a very critical question, I think, which you guys may need to address is, these conversations are very difficult. And one of the colleagues, in fact, they spoke about, they have a platform, but the conversation is not quite moving forward yet. It's not creating a, how do we begin to build a platform for this kind of thing to happen within the workplace? What's your view? What needs to happen?
So, Andrew, I want to use myself and Naya just as an example in terms of where we've come from. And that again, it relates back to the conversation we actually had in the group that I was also joining now, is again what I said in terms of relationship trumps all. So because Naya knows my story and because I know her story and where we come from, there's space to have the difficult conversation. So I can at any time, if I experience something and I feel uncomfortable with something, I can go to Naya with it at any time. And I'm very aware of the fact that whatever I'm feeling might have an impact on her because I know her story and where she comes from. But even though I am aware of that, we've given each other the space to bring those messy things into our relationship so that we can have a conversation, so that she can create context for me or maybe put it into perspective, or also hear what the unintended consequence of a specific thing is on me, coming from other side. And it's extremely difficult to have these conversations if there's no relationship. So to start having these conversations with no base, is extremely difficult. So the platform should be relationship, and then we build on.
And I think this is what people are probably grappling with. And Amanda just added something, a very important, I think, issue within that context is power dynamics, which makes it even more difficult in the workplace. So it's easy if it is a relationship, like, for example, you and Neo had to find each other, your partners. But now we're sitting in a big corporate whereby it is sometimes still not very well transformed. It is still very much dominated in the upper echelons by white management and so on. How do you begin to build the relationship? Because I think what people are asking is, where does one start with this, because of the very difficulties that people experience within that workplace?
And I'll take us back to that model, Andrew, in answering the question, right? First of all, because this conversation will get us all triggered, right? So we need to regulate first, and whatever we can use to regulate in the organization. So walking helps regulate the brain. Having a coffee already, doing something that is just regulatory to the brain. Movement, any breathing, when you know you're about to have that difficult conversation, do your breath work. So any movement that can already regulate the brain, that will help. And then the second step, as we said, is relating. So whatever thing I can relate with to my boss, or to the colleague, whatever we have, because what happens when we do that relating is it takes away the power dynamic. It takes away the inequality that we have, because then I touch the person in you that is the person in me, whatever we can relate to. So if I say, how was the rugby? Did you watch the rugby? Did you watch the soccer? Now we all have the Soccer World Cup happening for all of us. We just had a pandemic, all of us had a loss through the pandemic. So then I have made you a person. You are now a person I can relate to. The power dynamics have now lessened in so to say. And then once I've seen you, you're a person, then we've done those two things. The brain is quite ready then to have the difficult conversation. And I think that makes a little bit of sense, hopefully.
Yeah. I just want to give others also an opportunity just to come in. Ingrid, you're still there, or if you ran away already? Just want to check.
She's gone. Ingrid's gone.
Yeah, she's gone. Because she speaks about, focusing on pro-social goals first before task, and I just wanted to check with her what she meant by it. But let me take a few people from different groups. Amanda, could you speak for your pair?
Sorry, I was wanting to follow on with what Neo had been saying. Can I do that rather than?
Yeah, of course.
Is that fine? I so fully agree with you that we need to regulate ourselves first and then get into the relating. But in a situation that I was describing in my group, what happens, because the person in power is white, female, and the people who have an issue with her are Black, they very much do the relating. They very much do that because she's getting defensive, that the whole sort of white anti-fragility, not anti-fragility, the white fragility thing. So she's getting defensive. So they very much are putting out the olive branch with the relating. So they're saying things like, I recognize how much you've done. I recognize that you've bent over backwards for us. I recognize ABC. In other words, complimenting, trying to ease the waters so that they can have their concerns met and addressed. But what happens then is eventually it silences the conversation because she doesn't go there in a way. Do you know what I mean? She doesn't see it. She doesn't acknowledge. She doesn't get that in any way that she is not deserving of the praise and the empathy and everything that's been shown. So I'm just wanting to really ask you around that trickiness. In that, how to change the relating so that both sides are relating and empathizing. And
And
Maybe-
Naomi, Karien, hold that for a moment. Just remember that. I'm going to take 2 more because I just want to get more people to input here. Amy, from your group, any input from your group?
Did you say Penny, Dr. Andrew?
No, Amy Biggs.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm just looking on screen. Yeah.
I know in my group, we were speaking about things like the power dynamics, because I was telling Basil that I don't work in the corporate sector, I work more in the educational sector. And one of the things is there's a lot of older people there. So the conversations they are a bit difficult to have because I'm working with people that are much older than me, who have this idea or set idea of, let's say, different colors, different genders and things like that. So me coming in with my younger ideas of speaking to people or just relating to people seems a bit difficult with them, because they look at me and then they say, oh, you're talking to me in a way that I don't maybe find respectful or so. So that becomes a bit of a difficult conversation, knowing that I am speaking to you in a respectful way, but I just need you to change your way of thinking because it's becoming a bit too toxic. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Amy. And colleagues, if one of your pair members have already spoken, we can just move on because we want to get more ideas. Ronald, have you guys come up with any thoughts? Ronald?
Okay, thank you. So we identified 2 issues basically, which can be an impediment to those discussions. So the first one has to do with the cultural dynamics. If, for example, where someone is coming from a culture that appreciates more like timidness, it becomes very difficult to tackle such issues, such sensitive issues. Then the other point that was also raised is to do with the unconscious bias that's quite inherent within us. Those are really 2 points that we identified as impediments. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronald. Karien and Nayo, over to you.
I want to maybe comment now, if you'll allow me to speak first again. Just, I was in a group with Ingra, was in that group with us as well. And what I heard her say about the pro-social goals is that we have to have the conversation around process as well. So yes, we talk goals and we do presentations and we lift our voices around the table, but then we never talk about how do we actually experience this conversation? How did I experience this meeting that we had? I actually did not feel heard. And I just want to check with you, is it because I'm a white female? Is it because I'm a female in a technical environment? So I work on the mega projects in construction and mining. There's a lot of male engineers and male supervisors there. So to have that conversation, to check with them, I didn't feel heard. What was it that made you not want to hear what I had to say? So talk about that process, how everybody around the table felt, how engaged they felt, how heard they felt. Did they feel their contribution was being really looked at before it was being thrown out the door? Process is extremely important, and we never talk about that.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the, to answer Amanda on the white leader, female leader that is in that position. What is the process? We've got now these few processes that we can follow: the regulate, relate, and reason, but then also what rules. And I think sometimes when the tension is not there, to just say, what are the engagement rules that we can have? Because when we are in a heat of the moment, Mrs. Boss or Miss Boss, I feel that you don't hear me because she's acting from here. The amygdala is shooting. That's why she's not hearing. She's just seeing red. That's when you see red. So sometimes even when you're trying to reason with her, it doesn't happen. Or we're trying to regulate and relate, it doesn't happen. So what are the things that I can say at that moment that you can hear me? Because sometimes when we get in that conversation, you get defensive. What is it about me? And the question that Karien asked, why was it? Is it because I'm female and you didn't hear me? Or is it because I'm a Black reportee that you don't hear me? And sometimes people can get defensive and you just ask, okay, what is it then? Because we need to get to the bottom of this. It's nothing to do with you, in a sense that you're not, sometimes, a lot of times when we have this conversation, people think you are saying I'm not good. It's not a question about your goodness or your badness. It's about the process that we need to go through and the procedure that we need to go through to get to a solution. So it's not about good or bad. And we need to always clarify that, because sometimes when we get into this conversation, people think, oh no, you're making me a bad person.
Yeah.
So I want to ask the question maybe into the group, Andrew, in terms of when we get triggered, are you acutely aware of what is the type of situations and the type of conversations that trigger you? Because if you can stay calm and if you can respond instead of react, then you might facilitate and help the conversation go in another direction. But for that, you need to do that identity, that self-work first. So I almost want to ask you guys, do you ever go to that space first, or do you immediately go to the space of the other person made me uncomfortable? Yes, they for surely played a role, but do I understand my triggers enough so that I can give proper feedback and give language to what I'm feeling so that other people are aware of the impact they have on me?
How do you think, and I want to put Lorato on the spot here, how do you think, what's the kind of advice that you would have given to the person when the person responded? If you can just relate that story, Lorato, about what the manager, you don't have to identify the organization, but what did the manager say in that meeting and how one of the other Black colleagues responded to it? Lorato?
Just want to check if you can hear me.
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
we can.
perfectly clear.
Cool. I think, yeah, we were just having the example I used was just around, we were having a conversation around promotions, and one of the leaders was trying to emphasize how it was important that there were non-EE candidates, and he wanted to promote them to retain them in the business. But out of frustration, I mean, what he said was, what's more important? Is it business or is it transformation? And that was obviously something that was offensive to people that are non-EE, well, that are EE people in the room. And I mean,
Trigger.
Correct. And I mean, one of the leaders even said, I will not proceed with this meeting with that kind of statement being said. I am offended by it, and I refuse to proceed in this meeting with those kind of statements being echoed in the room.
And I think that's the point, right? To realize that at that moment, everybody's triggered. And if there's any message we can get through to the group today is that once we are triggered, and we act in that mode when we are triggered, we won't get to any solutions. Or solutions that will actually lead us to where we want to be. We're just going to react. So we're going to need to pause and think about our reactions to the conversation, especially us as IOPs who lead the conversations. How do we react in those meetings where those conversations are happening? And how do we lead then the conversation in those meetings? When a colleague is saying something that is out of order, that is not legislative, that is, something, and you can realize everybody's triggered. And this conversation will trigger everyone, will trigger old people, young people, white people, Black people, different genders. So we quite have a ambidextrous position to play as IOPs in this conversation. And I think I'm looking at the time now, but I think the message is that you yourself make sure that you are regulated. You can actually get everybody who's triggered by the conversation and then make sure they get to a point where they can reason. And once everybody can get to a point where they can reason, then we can listen to each other. Then I can actually hear where you're coming from. Why is it important to appoint EE candidate and skill? They're actually holding both of them hold equal importance. But I can't hear you if I'm triggered that it's equally important. But if I'm not triggered, I'm actually able to extend a little bit of empathy and a little bit of grace to the conversation, and then we can get to the solution.
And perhaps the very fact that everybody is going to get triggered means the IOP has got a role to play here to say,
Yes.
can we just calm down? Don't leave the room, Mr. Manager. Let's talk about this and just kind of explore it a little bit further. Maybe an important role there. I'm going to take one or two more thoughts from the floor. Maybe Nompumelelo, have you got a view?
Hi everyone. I think my view was partly covered by the previous speaker who had spoken about that inherent what is that English word again? Unconscious biasness. Unconscious bias. Yeah. And also maybe furthermore from my side, particularly based on my personal experiences, is that there seemed to be an expectation that there is the other, inverted commas. I was just talking to the lady that I was speaking to in my group, that the other being either Black or female or both Black, female. There's sort of an expectation that if you fall under the other, you must then understand. You must never be triggered. If the other person is triggered, you've got to understand because they got triggered, but you've got no right to get triggered. They can react, but you can't react. You must calm down. You've got no room to react and express yourself and blah, blah, blah. And I'm also saying this mostly based on my experiences that I've had thus far, because there's certain instances where you feel that, no, I need to say this. And there is maybe not verbatim, a suggestive way to say, but you can't say that because you are Black. You can't express yourself in that manner. And if you make a mistake, you must apologize. And we don't have to apologize. I mean, it was a mistake. Surely you do understand that.
Thanks very much, Mpumelelo. And then one more person. Anne, have you got any feedback from your conversation? Anne still there?
Well, who was Anne with in the group?
I don't know. Let me ask Karien.
Sorry, Andrew. Sorry. I was just trying to unmute myself.
No problem.
I couldn't find the button.
Sure.
I think, Andrew, the thing that came out, I was with Geraldine, and I think the thing that came out there is the power dynamics as well. But I think, that's been covered quite extensively. But I think the one thing that for me just becomes increasingly clear is also just the awareness, again, from a whiteness point of view, is white people being aware, and at least of the potential for, how can I put it, that whiteness exists, and that we need to be more sensitive in situations where we need to realize our history. We need to realize the impact that our history has had on people, and we need to take responsibility for the kind of emotions. And I mean, we can't personally take responsibility in the sense that it's our fault, but we understand and have empathy for what people are going through and the reasons people are triggered. And I think for me, that awareness is very important, because then we can at least understand and that the triggering is legitimate, and that we can be triggered too, and that's okay, but that it's not illegitimate, that responses like that example of Lorato's is a legitimate response, and it's coming from somewhere. So that's something I feel quite strongly about.
Right. Thanks very much, Anne. And anybody else, before I give the two discussants the final word, anybody have a very strong point, a great idea that you'd like to share with us? Anybody from the group? Okay. So I hope that we have kind of tried to represent a variety of ideas just for the discussants also to respond to. And I'm going to ask them then to take a a view on what you've heard, what is your final recommendations to us as we embark on difficult conversations. I'm going to go and try it out with Karien.
We still owe each other a conversation.
Go for it, Karien.
Just in conclusion, colleagues, I just think in looking at the time, it is what everybody has said. It's important, and especially us as IOPs, to become deliberate in this conversation, to become includers. When you do see a situation where it is not inclusive in a boardroom, in a whichever situation, that you ask those questions, and then you've got now the model to kind of get the conversation to where it needs to get to. And we won't find all the answers in one setting. Hopefully what we've done here is just share some tools to go have those difficult conversations, to lead those conversations in the workplace. And we don't have to be scared of difference. Whatever we say here, you are welcome to disagree with me. You're welcome to differ from me. But as long as there can be that respect and see where I see you, where you're coming from, and you see where I come from. And I think more than anything, if we can create that space in the workplace to see where each other comes from and create that place to have that conversation. You know, Brene Brown says, judgment closes the conversation. So we don't need to close the conversation by judging. These people are like that, these people are like this. But we always need to stay curious. And I think just in conclusion, looking at the time, I'm leaving you with Brene and Adam Grant. They like to say, stay curious, ask the question. When somebody does something that it looks like it's not acceptable to you, ask them why, because sometimes I bet you they haven't even thought of it. So ask why. You know, whatever we've heard in this conversation, why do you act like that? Why are you fragile in this situation? Why are you triggered in this situation? Ask why. Ask, ask, ask. Okay.
Thanks,
Andrew,
that
was the final thoughts.
Okay, Karien, you want to add anything?
Yeah, maybe just from, I'm very passionate about people, about the fact that we often disconnect because of various reasons, because of power struggles, because of biases and unconscious biasness. I'm not aware of my biases. Maybe you're not aware of your biases, whatever. There's a lot of reasons why we as humans disconnect. And my passion lies in that space. How can we reconnect? Because we have so much more in common. We have so much more, if I can quote Mr. Bosman from Black Panther, we have so much more in common. We have so much more that connects us than that disconnects us. And if we can just keep ourselves and each other accountable to move back to that space to reconnect, then we will slowly but very surely move forward, I believe.
Great, thanks very much, Nayo and Karien, for those thoughts. Invariably, these conversations are wanting days for us to sit around the fire and talk about it, but we have only an hour, and that's what we have to do, because they also say, if you can't say it in 1 minute, then the question is there anything you do want to say? So you need to say it very strongly and firmly. So basically, colleagues, it is about these difficult conversations in the workplace. They will continue, and they'll continue to challenge us, pushing us into a space of fear. But as Madiba has quoted, we need to act in spite of our fear. And I think it's a big responsibility for IOPs to help that conversation happening within the workplace. Thank you very much to all of you and to our two discussants, Nayo and Karien, for our veteran people who are in here. Each one brings one. That is our motto here to our conversations, because we want to broaden our conversations. I wish you all really a lovely break. If you are taking some, for some people who are consultants, they seem to just carry on all the time, but you have to push yourself. So take some time out to refuel. We are back in January, late January, with another hot topic, and I will inform you in due course what will we be talking about. Again, the invitation, if you have a topic, let me know. If you want to present, let me know. The context is transformation. What are those difficult things that we are trying to have clumsy conversations on? And with that, colleagues, I wish you a good evening.
May